Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of our sports show. As you know, we've been airing for the last couple of weeks. We're running an exciting new feature on our show called Global Rugby Legends, where we're speaking to some of the most renowned names in international rugby over the last 30 or 40 years. We're speaking to world stars from Scotland, Wales, Italy, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Argentina, and some of the biggest names in world rugby. And I'm delighted that our guest this evening is an absolute great in terms of South African rugby. He donned the famous Munster jersey a few times as well, to great aplomb, and he's a World Cup winner. He won the World Cup representing South Africa in 2007. He's made 2002, 2015. He made over 109 appearances for his country, 135 points. Total tests for South Africa, 109. Springboks captain on 54 occasions. Captain's tests, 27. Tries for South Africa, 27. And total career tries, 94. All in all, the great Jan de Villiers, inside centre and a wing. Jan, a fantastic career for you in terms of rugby, in terms of world rugby. But I just have to start off for you. When we think about a great career for you, sometimes we remember the injuries, and injuries unfortunately dogged you in terms of 2 World Cups. How disappointing is that? Is that the big regret for you when you look back on what was a terrific career, that injuries came for you at the most unfortunate times?
Yeah, Jim, firstly, thanks for having me on the show. It's great to hear the Irish accent again, and just to speak to, I suppose not only the people from the Munster region, but the broader island as well. I have some very fond memories of my time being spent there. Coming back to your question, 100%, injuries are unfortunately, part and parcel of a rugby player's career. And I suppose in terms of my career, just always came at a bad time. The timing was a little bit bad, but I won't say I regret anything. I think in a way, you need to understand that life is never perfect. And certainly when it comes to a rugby career, it's not perfect either, and that things will happen, adversity will strike, and it's the way that you approach those things that's important. So in a way, I feel that, through my injuries, it actually made me a better and a stronger person. And I was still able to really live my dream throughout a 17-year professional career. So no regrets, to be honest. Disappointments, 100%, but that's part and parcel of life.
And growing up in South Africa, I know the 3 major sports in terms of South Africa. One obviously is rugby, the other is cricket, and the other, to a lesser extent, well, it's grown in the last 10 years, is soccer in terms of football. But growing up for you, was it always rugby? Were you a good sprinter? Were you a good runner? Were you versed in other areas of sport? Were you a natural athlete? Or were you always drawn to the rugby, and was it always from an early go the one sort of sport? Or were you a diverse athlete?
Yeah, look, I suppose all of the above. I think rugby was always number one. Rugby was always the sport that I preferred above most. But I loved and still do love, most sports. So I participated in as many as possible. I actually swam provincially from the age of 7. So like the regional teams here in South Africa, I always played cricket and, captained my first cricket team, and from an athletics point of view, also a sprinter, and then a couple of other things as well. So I always did as much as possible, and really just, and still do love being outdoors and participating. But it's mostly the team sports and the sports that's with balls that you kind of that I was attracted to more, and rugby was always the one that stood out more than any. So loved the game. My dad played for Western Province as well, so I grew up in a home where rugby was always relevant as well, and like I said earlier, lucky to have been able to live my dream eventually.
And I know you started out in terms of your professional career as an inside centre, as a wing, but growing up as a young boy, did you play in all positions in terms of rugby? Were you a fly half? Were you a scrum half? Were you versed in all sorts of positions? And what was your natural flair growing up as a young lad? Were you a sort of the scrum half, the smart little boy trying to find his way out of the packs, or were you right in that front row?
Look, I was. I suppose I was lucky that I was never pushed into a single digit number on my back. I come from a family that's pretty big as well. My dad was a lock, and my brother was a tight head. My mom was a swimmer, so she didn't play rugby. But I was lucky that from day one, I was never the biggest. I was kind of a medium-sized kid. And initially in the early days, played fly-off, and from there it moved to centre, to the midfield. And I suppose the reason I got pushed away from the fly-off position is that kicking wasn't really my strong point. I loved to keep ball in hand, and I suppose over the years that's the way I enjoyed to play as a professional as well. So luckily I was never pushed into the scrum, because the crazy things that happened up front there. I'm glad I never got exposed to that.
And I suppose, Yang, growing up in terms of rugby, were you well versed in school? Could you have gone down different routes in terms of education? When did rugby become serious for you? Was it 15, 16, 17? I know you were making amateur South African teams and 7-a-side teams. Then was that really right? I could have a real professional career in this.
Yeah, look, I suppose I was always pushed by my parents, and especially my mom. So she comes from a teaching background, so always pushed to obviously work hard from an educational point of view, and that would always be my advice to kids growing up now as well, and wanting to pursue a professional sporting career is to make sure that you have something behind your name, and make sure that your education is on a high level as well. So I definitely had that, but as I mentioned earlier, any ball related game was always my first priority and thing that I wanted to do. So when it came to studying time, my mom always tells the story how she just used to hear me up in my room and just hear the ball against the wall, bouncing against the wall all the time. But yeah, got through school. I was lucky to get a professional contract straight out of school. So rugby kind of turned professional, obviously in 96, 97, and I finished school at the age of, in 1999. And even before that, I always said I wanted to become a rugby player, and being a bit naive in terms of what can be done at that stage. But got a contract straight out of school, and I suppose never looked back after that. So lucky in a way as well, that it worked out the way that I wanted to. And if you ask me the question, what would I have done if I did not become a rugby player? I don't know if I'd be able to answer you, to be honest.
Yeah. And I suppose, Jan, in terms of your club career with Western Province and Stormers in your own sort of country, in the sort of Tri-Nation sort of atmosphere in Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, that sort of environment, was it always a passion for you someday to try your luck overseas, to try out in the Northern Hemisphere? But would you have been very much Clum if you had played your whole professional club career in the Southern Hemisphere? And was it a daunting experience the first time you and your family sort of ventured into the Northern Hemisphere? And was it a real sort of a change for you?
Yeah, look, I think when you get the opportunity to play rugby professionally, and you get the opportunity to base yourself in a different country and experience something differently, I think that's an opportunity that you can't let go past. I think I love the history of rugby. I like the clubs, and if you go down in the history of rugby, the clubs that are really strong in terms of their rugby culture and what they stand for. So when I got approached by a couple of clubs to move abroad, there were a couple of French teams that came with big offers and whatever. And I started looking at what options there might be playing abroad, and then the Munster opportunity came up, and I think from day one it just really felt right in terms of it's a club so full of history, so full of heritage, and I just absolutely love what the club stands for and what I experienced there. So to be able to now suddenly be in a team where you're playing with a Paul O'Connell and a Ronan O'Gara and a Dougie Howlett and all the other big names that played in the Munster team of that generation, where normally you play against them in test matches, and to see the way that they think about the game, the way that they approach the game, and then eventually become friends, that's priceless, and you really can't put a price tag on it. And I think you grow as a rugby player firstly, but you grow even more as a human being, and you make friends, which is extremely special. And then also to just see the following that a team like Munster has, and how passionate they are about the rugby team.
Yeah, and I'll come back and I'll touch on Munster again in a few moments. But I just want to go on to South Africa, and obviously you made your debut for South Africa against France in 2002, and you got injured on your debut, unfortunately. But then there was a series of Tri-Nation sort of victories in 2004 and 2009. Obviously, the 2007 World Cup, that injury, and it was a bad injury, dare I say, in terms of that opening sort of game. And in 2014 with Wales and the dislocated knee. Did you feel that at times the Tri-Nations, they were great for you, and there were victories for you, and it led to captain and your country as well? How much is the rivalry and the heritage to win a Tri-Nation? Is it seen as a Grand Slam as important as the Six Nations is seen here in the Northern Hemisphere?
Oh, without a doubt. I think winning a Grand Slam is something that's really special. I think what makes the Tri-Nations a little bit different is the fact that, and talking about traditionally the Tri-Nations, you play Australia and New Zealand home and away. Both gets a fair shot at it home and away, and if you can eventually get more points than the opposition throughout the competition, you're victorious. So we saw Ireland this year for the first time being able to claim a series win in New Zealand, and because it's such a difficult feat, and for us to have been able, especially the 2009 Tri-Nations that we won, to be able to beat New Zealand 3 times and come out victorious and beat Australia. That was a special campaign, and it was on the back of beating the Lions that year as well. So it was a hell of a competition, the Tri-Nations, and certainly on par with winning the Grand Slam.
Yeah, and Jan, in terms of you mentioned the Tri-Nations, and you mentioned the Rugby World Cup there as well. But how much for you was the significance of 1996? Obviously, a great day for all South African players and South African supporters. That monkey off the back, winning that sort of Rugby World Cup, obviously, the great Jan de Westerhuis and Joel Stransky with the penalties. Did that make you sort of strive to say, yeah, I want this to happen to me, and I want to be there and to achieve that sort of feat as well? Was that the real burning ambition? And was that the one that said, right, this is for me?
Yeah, look, I don't think it was 95 was a monkey off their backs at all. It was the first go at it from a South African point of view, obviously not participating in 87 and 91. So it being hosted in South Africa and then being able to win it, the way that it changed the country and the way that it really inspired so many people and youngsters like myself, it really was a moment that I can look back at and say that, I watched that game and I said to myself, look, it's something that I would love to do one day as well. And it really inspired me. So it was a massive moment, not only in the history of South African rugby, but in the history of South Africa as a country.
And I suppose, Jan, you played with some magnificent players throughout your career in club rugby, but also in international rugby. Just bring on 2 of them, Brian Habana and the great Joost van der Westhuizen, and obviously you graced the field with those 2 magnificent players on your time. They probably stand out in terms of modern rugby greats as well. What made them 2 guys so special? Or were they just down-to-earth, hard-working guys?
Yeah, look... and a fair bit of talent as well, make no mistake. Yeah. Look, I played way more rugby with Brian Habana than I did with Joost van der Westhuizen. But Joost was a fantastic rugby player and a great competitor. Fourie de Pree, who I played a lot of rugby with, and who's still a good friend, I would say he's on par and might even have been a little bit better than a Joost van der Westhuizen. But South Africa fortunate to have had two such legendary scrum halves play for a number of years. Brian Habana, to be selected in a certain year as the best player in the world, as he was in 2007, is something, that is so special. Still the second most tries scored in the history of rugby at international level. And that just, again, amplifies and shows what a great player he was. Look, there are so many other, Skalkberger, 2004 World Player of the Year as well, and so many other guys that I can mention that I played with and are fortunate enough to still call my friends. But that's what makes the game such a beautiful thing.
And Jan, that Irish connection, you played against him so many times wearing the South African jersey, but you got to play with him at Munster as well, Peter Stringer and Ronan O'Gara. Behind those two in big sort of key games in that inside centre position, do you always feel that that partnership was one of the best for you?
Yeah, look, it was extremely difficult to get used to Roger's accent when I started playing with him on the field. But look, it was, I only have good things to say about the players that I played with at Munster, the supporters at Munster, and the experience of playing at that club. So, I'm fortunate that I'm still very much in contact with Rog, and great to see that he's done so well, in his coaching career. And String, same thing. The fact that he was able to play for so long, until such an old age, again, testament to him and his the work that he puts in and the professionalism that he showed as a professional player.
Yeah, and finally, in terms of captaining your country, 54 times is a great honour for anyone to captain your country. But that first time you got to wear the armband, you were told you were going to be wearing the armband for South Africa. Any sorts of special memories of that occasion?
Yeah, look, I must firstly say I'm sitting here in my car, and I see like the sun is fading away, so I'm disappearing on screen here to do the interview. There we go. There's a bit of light. To get asked to lead your country as a captain, it really is something that is so special, and I still remember it very fondly. Like yesterday, and the coach asked me whether I'd consider being the captain. I said yes, and got back in my room, phoned my wife, and you get emotional about something like that, and because you understand the enormous responsibility that it carries as well. So it was against England in Durban. We were able to win the game, and I scored a try on the day as well. So it ended up being a really special day, and it continued like that every single opportunity I got to captain my country.
And Jan de Villiers, finally from me to you as we sum up this episode of Global Rugby Legends. If you could summarise your career maybe in 2 sentences, what would you like those sorts of 2 sentences to read?
Look, extremely fortunate to have toured the world, meet many and make new friends. Yes, I had disappointments in my career, but I learned through it. I maintained a good attitude through it, and I think as a whole, rugby has made me a much better person.
On that note, Jan de Villiers, one of the great South African rugby for this episode of Global Rugby Legends. Obviously, Jan de Villiers, total test 109, Springboks captain 54 times, tries for South Africa 27, total career tries 94. One of the greats, a World Cup winner, representing Munster from 2009 2010, 23 appearances, 40 points. Jan de Villiers, an absolute pleasure. Take care.
Thank you very much.